पुनीत, आप मुझे वो डॉग बना दोगे प्लीज?
यस मैम, अब सुनेगा सबको।
पुनीत, आप मुझे वो डॉग बना दोगे प्लीज?
यस मैम,
वॉइस
अब सुनेगा।
Hello, everyone. While you all are joining, if you can introduce yourself in the comment section, leave a chat on the side to send, like, introduce yourself, your name, and everyone. While you all are joining, if you can introduce yourself in the comment section, leave a chat on the side to
Hello everyone. I hope you're all doing very well now. So we have with us Siddhant Agarwal today, and it's going to help you further with the design challenge that we're doing. So we also are looking forward for you to pay a lot of attention to it, so that that you have are addressed. Now the whole session till now we have progressed. We had Niyam Bhushan's session with you, that session where he told you how important it is to think creatively. Then we had, are you able to hear me, by the way? Are you able to hear me? Okay. Okay, fine. Thank you. So, next we had Mr. Ghansham helping us. So, he told you what are the nitty-gritties and techniques of design thinking, and that help you to plan your design. Today, we have Siddhant Agarwal who's going to tell you about what is it that design thinking is all about. How does Google perceive design thinkers, and how does it work in a Google setup. So I'll hand over the stage to Siddhant. If
All right.
anyone has a question, you will put it on the chat. Please do not interrupt in between. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Anamika, for giving a quick introduction. Uh, and thank you all of you to join for this session on design thinking for young innovators. I just want to share a few stories with you, few case studies, which might help you in this entire hackathon, in this entire challenge. Uh, with this, I will just print my screen and we can get started with this now. All right. Just a few quick things before we get started. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat section on the right. Mention your name, your school, where are you studying right now, your class in which you are enrolled in. And if you have any questions while I'm presenting, feel free to use the chat window again. And we can address those questions towards the end once we are done with the entire session. Cool. Moving on. Once again, hello everyone. My name is Siddhant and I work as program coordinator with developer relations team at Google in India. I hope you're all comfortable with English. If not, do let me know in the comment section again. What we do as part of Google developer relations team, we enable and empower the vibrant Indian developer ecosystem to build impactful solutions using Google technologies that can change the lives of the next billion users. These are some of the programs that we engage with as part of our initiatives at Google Developer Relations team. GDG stands for Google Developer Groups, Developer Student Clubs, Google Developer Experts, Google for Startups Accelerator Program, Women Tech Makers Program. While most of these programs are primarily for undergrad students and working professionals, we do have something for K-12 students, which is not part of our team, but there are various other teams at Google that organizes those events, those programs, like Code to Learn, if you have ever heard of. I'm not too sure what's the current state of the program, but yeah, that's something that we have done in the past. Before I begin, allow me to take a moment to talk about the current COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused extreme amount of panic and suffering to the entire world. And to say that we are all in this together. This too shall pass. And I would say, till then, just stay safe, stay healthy, and stay indoors. With this, let's begin our session for the day. So you have already gone through various stages of design thinking in the past sessions by Niyam and Ghansham, where they talked about how design thinking as a process focuses on solving challenges with user-centric and innovative results. We begin with empathy and explore ways of putting ourselves in the user's shoes so that we can define a point of view for how our user relates to the problem at hand. From there, we brainstorm 10x ideas and then prototype them so we can fail fast and learn from our ideas through testing. I'm sure you have already gone through all of these stages, all of these steps in the previous sessions. But let me just take a deep dive into a few of those areas and talk more from a story perspective. I will be talking to you about 3 case studies or 3 stories that can help you relate to these 5 steps, 5 areas of design thinking. Before that, when we talk about empathy, it is not sympathy. Empathy is a term we use for the ability to understand other people's feelings, as if we are having them ourselves. Empathy can also mean projecting our own feeling onto a work of art or another object. Sympathy refers to the ability to take part in someone else's feelings, mostly by feeling sorrowful about their misfortune. Sympathy can also be used in relation to opinions and taste, like when you say that you have a sympathy for a political cause. So there's a vast difference between sympathy and empathy, and we need to understand that. In design thinking, empathy is the base of solving anything. We need to empathize with our user. Let me start with our first case study. If you look at this picture, this is basically president of Slovakia, which made news all over the internet in the last few weeks, where it says that hey, the president of Slovakia has nailed her coronavirus look. So if you look at carefully, like she's having a matching dress and a matching face mask, surgical mask, to protect herself from coronavirus. Similarly, there are a bunch of other images that were going around on internet where they've been like uh, how uh, how the industry is transforming themselves to like align with the fashion industry. Now, when it comes to empathizing with the user, if I show you this particular image, you might feel, hey, that's a new fashion trend. We talked about matching face masks. Now comes a new trend, which shows you like, hey, it's a transparent cover, uh, which where you can see anyone smiling. But that is not a fashion statement. We know the market potential of but that is not a fashion statement. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, health workers are desperately seeking personal protective equipment, PPE as we say, which is in short supply. Although many people have been creating reusable fabric masks, which the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended to help slow the spread of virus. You must be already be knowing about this already. Like there's an acute shortage of PPE, acute shortage of surgical masks, face masks. So people are moving to fabric masks. They are making something at their home. While this was happening, we excluded a key group from this entire movement, which is the deaf and the hard of hearing community. To help change this, Ashley Lawrence, a college student studying education for the deaf and hard of hearing, has designed a face mask with a clear window that allows users or allows others to see and read lips and facial expressions. So if you look at the mask, that's basically not a fashion statement, but rather helping a community which is deaf and hard of hearing community. Now, how this girl Ashley Lawrence was able to come up with this, because she was able to empathize with the users, able to empathize with the with someone who would be using this, and came up, okay, how they would be talking to them, how uh, the people who are deaf, who are hard of hearing, can understand what the surgeons are saying or what other people are saying. So they need to come up with something where they can still have a control on the disease spread, but at the same time, they also have a message going out. They can communicate. This was one way of empathizing with the user. Moving on, how many of you have seen this machine? It's an MRI machine. If you have not seen this, do search it out. What does an MRI do? MRI basically helps doctors scan their mental state to understand what is happening inside the brain of a human being. So I talked about empathizing. Now moving on to defining and ideating, how a person could think of defining and ideate. So I'll talk about this person, Doug Dietz, in a while. So when we talk about diagnosing imaging procedures, which is a cutting edge technology, but at the same time, it is very unpleasant for patients, even more for pediatric patients, for children, for kids. So this person named Doug Dietz, who is an industrial engineer, he was working for General Electronics Healthcare, GE Healthcare, since more than 20 years almost. So he remembered the first time when he saw a little girl who was crying on her way to scanner, and he designed the scanner. So he was like, "Why is this little girl crying on her way to the scanning machine?" So he suddenly saw the situation with the eyes of a girl, that the room itself is kind of dark, and those flickering fluorescent lights out there in the machine room, and that machine that he had designed basically looked like it's a brick with a hole in it. So anyone would definitely be scared of it. So he thought from that perspective, and he defined a problem over here. A new challenge was born. He thought of like, how could one create a scanner or a scanner experience that children would love? So what he did, he ideated. He moved forward. He tried to find new inspiration for this project by trying out design thinking. He went to Stanford's D School for a workshop. The workshop offered Doug new tools that ignited his creative confidence. He learned about a human-centered approach, which is basically how you can think of humans first, how you can put humans or users first to design and innovation. Going through that design thinking process, human-centered design process, with people in diverse industries and roles, from management to human resources to finance, it struck a chord to him. He started by observing and gaining empathy for young children at a daycare center. He talked to child life specialists to understand what pediatric patients went through. He reached out for help from people around him, including a small volunteer from GE, experts from a local children's museum, and doctors and staff from 2 hospitals. He then went on to prototype. He created something. Next, he created the first prototype, what would become the Adventure Series scanner, and was able to get it installed as a pilot program in the Children's Hospital at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. This is what Doug Dietz invented after his user research. He talked to various people. He researched about it. He defined a problem statement. He was first able to empathize with that girl, to understand what is it, why that girl was afraid of going into scanner. He then defined, okay, I need to come up with a scanning experience which can make it lovable for children. And then he ideated upon it. How can someone come up with this kind of an experience? So to come up with that ideation, he talked to various users, various people from that background, and then created this prototype. In the pilot adventure, a visual transformation of the equipment that was available before, patients are on a dock. Like as you can see in this image, patients lie on this like a dock. There's a shipwreck and some sandcastles in the corner. Children then work on the plank to be scanned. So they feel more they feel more connected. Okay, now I'm in a fairy world, fairy tale land. Similarly, he created another experiment, which is the Coral City Adventure. In this emergency room gives children an underwater experience. It has a disco ball that makes light bubbles around the room. Children get into a yellow submarine and listen to the sound of harps while the procedure happens. Similarly, the Cozy Camp, he came up with various versions of it. He came up with a Cozy Camp, which gives children the chance to be scanned in a specialized sleeping bag under a starry sky in an impressive camp setting. So he came up with various prototypes to understand how things happen. So this is what he came up with. This was his user research. And then he came up with the prototype, and next was his testing. So when it comes to testing, there were some positive impacts that Doug Dietz can derive from his adventure series. First of all, the patient satisfaction scores went up to 90%. Children do not suffer of anxiety anymore. Instead, some of them even ask their patients if they can come back tomorrow, even ask their parents if they come back tomorrow. It makes it easier for the children to hold still during the procedure, what in turn prevents the doctor from having to repeat the scan. So earlier, what used to happen was, because it used to seem like someone is entering into a black hole or in a dark zone, children used to fear from it. So now they instead hold still. They don't move around. They don't feel panic when they are entering into that particular machine. And more and all, if you look at this image, not just the machine or the room setup itself, to empathize with that kid, to empathize with children, Even the doctors and the staff and the nurses were dressed like a pirate. They were dressed in that particular room's environment to match that environment. This less needs. So this basically reduces the need for anesthesiologists, uh, which usually used to happen, that anesthesia used to be given to these patients before the scanning happens, so that they hold still. And this experience of joy and play during the scan also took away the fear from parents. Parents were also not too much concerned now. As Doug Dietz puts it, if you got the child, you got the parent, and if you got the parent, you got the child. So he was in a way handling both the situations in hand. He was just handling a kid's fear, at the same time he was handling concern of a parent, that nothing is going to happen to their kid. So now he trains the G employees to use design thinking and innovation methods in the teams. So this was one example where I talked about how someone can empathize and define, then ideate, and then prototype on it, and then to later on test and validate whether it really worked or not. Similarly, if I have to talk in something maybe you could relate to, an old man who is living in rural India, a village. If I were to ask you to like build something for or design something uh, which could be an internet-based solution for this old man. He could be a farmer, or even he could be a grocery store owner, or he could be a shepherd. How will you do it? What are the things that you will keep in mind when building for this particular person? When designing something for this old man, um, he could be even a, a grandparent, for instance. How will you design it? If you're thinking of it, hey, I will come up with a mobile app that can, let's say if you're talking about he's a farmer and he wants to sell his produce outside into the local store, into the local market. So you might think about how I can come up with a mobile app. I can design something, a mobile app, and that will allow this person to sell their goods online. But we are missing out on a fundamental question over here. Uh, are we empathizing with this particular user? Are we empathizing with this person, this farmer? Maybe not. Why? Because the entry level devices, the kind of devices that they are using might be of low memory. They might be running on older operating systems. They might be using even feature phones. So when I say feature phones, they could be like your keypad phones. So if you're designing a solution which is like a smartphone based solution, which is like an app which requires internet, maybe that's not the solution. So that's on the devices. Similarly, they might be not connected with internet via Wi-Fi. They might be using just cellular data, uh, which in rural India it could be expensive. The connection would be slow. It could be patchy. They might not be able to have a better experience. Or even if you're thinking of when they log into the platform, you might ask them, "Hey, enter your email ID," or something on those lines. They might not be even having an email ID, or they often do not see any value in creating an email account. So all they have is maybe just a phone number, or maybe few SIM cards, one for one particular task, maybe like for their work, and one for their personal use. Um, and privacy is something they are more concerned about. So how will you think about this kind of a user? How will you design something for this person? So these are just few examples like how you can think of an innovative solution for data conscious users. So what we did at Google, we had a similar challenge where how to come up with uh, a particular solution that can help users download YouTube videos, or for these entry-level devices, entry-level smartphones, how they can use it. So they came up with this Android Go, which is like a variant of Android smartphone, Android OS, basically, that works seamlessly on these smaller devices. When I say smaller devices, basically smaller memory devices. They came up with a similar version of um, Go applications as well, like YouTube Go. Even that's something available in the normal YouTube as well, where you can download videos, keep it offline, and you have an option to download in various formats like SD or high quality or extra high quality formats. Similarly, Google came up with this Vodafone Idea phone line. If you know about Google Assistant, if you have tried Google Assistant, where with just a tap of a button you say something and it performs tasks for you, Google thought of what about the users who do not have internet connection on their phones. So they came up with this Vodafone Idea phone line where you do not need an internet connection and you communicate or you talk to Google Assistant in a similar way as you have been using on a smartphone. Similarly, WhatsApp thought of, hey, email IDs is not something that we should think of as an someone to access my particular platform. So they came up with phone-based authentication. So they just had a phone number. Like every user would have a phone number. They just need to log in via phone number. They'll get an OTP to verify, and they will just be able to log in and enter into my platform. uh, Voice-based solutions, like while WhatsApp has a text-based solution, they also thought of the typing or writing onto the smartphone might be too tiring, or might not be the apt solution, or they could be something in addition to it. So they came up with this voice-based solutions, like you now can record your voice and send it to the recipient. And they came up with a YouTube. They integrate, like for example, Google integrated Google Assistant with almost all of their applications. Now you can search with just tapping on it and say, hey, okay, Google, and just start your talk, and then they can respond accordingly. Google Assistant is becoming more and more powerful. You can check your balance, you can order food, you can order cab. Now things have been changing. This is something that happened in the recent times. To empathize with the user, uh, this dashboard, covid19india.org, you can go and check on this. This particular dashboard, people use it, or end user use it to see what is happening, um, like what is the count of coronavirus cases in Maharashtra or Delhi or Rajasthan or any other state, or from a district perspective. But if we have to think about someone who is living in a tier 2 city or a tier 3 city, if I have to design a solution which is end-to-end, caters to that audience, which might not be an English-speaking audience, how can I do it? So this particular group of people from Slang Lab, they came up with a voice-based, voice-enabled COVID-19 tracker. So if you look at closely in the bottom right corner, you will see there is a option to just tap on it, and you will be able to like just say out, I want to know, like in Hindi, you can just say the state name, and it will give you the number of, like it will just say it aloud, the number of current COVID-19 cases in that particular state. Similarly, Hike came up with this vernacular content. So vernacular is something you can also think of. You might not be able, you should not be designing a solution which is just English based. Think of vernacular content is also another feature. Like you can provide English or Tamil or Marathi as an option to like browse through your application solution that you have made, so that you target each and every segment of that of the users. If you have not tried this, do try this application called Google Lens. Google Lens basically allows users to translate text by pointing their phone's camera at banners, documents, and much more. So now what Google Lens cannot do earlier, it has now integration of 3 new Indian languages: Tamil, Telugu, Marathi. And that's how Google looks at things. They think of users first. They think of how I can reach out to more and more users and more wide range of users. Similarly, this application Google Bolo, I am sure you must have heard about this. It is now supporting Indian languages: Bangla, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, and Urdu. which they also announced a partnership with publishers like Chota Bheem and Katha Kids as part of its content expansion plans. If we have not tried Bolo, do try it out. It's a speech-based app that helps children to learn how to read. Uh, these are some of the examples that I shared, where which tells you like how to put user first, how Google thinks about it, how any other organization thinks about it, and that's basically the end of it. Uh, if you have any questions, we can take it up now. You can put it into the chat window, and we can start addressing those questions now. I think we have less of a time, but I'm happy to take up any questions you have. Do we have any questions? I don't see them in the chat. Feel free to enter it into the chat. Or if there are no questions, I would request Puneet or Anamika to take over and talk about the next steps for Design Hackathon. I hope it was helpful for you all to know about what is design thinking and how Google uses design thinking. What is a way to prototype a game? So you can come up with, that's a good question, Heshima. So you can come up with one or two levels, see how the progression of the game happens. Uh, that's a way of prototyping. One thing that I would always advise is, once you're developed with those 2-3 levels, give it out to a user who can relate to it. Let's say you are designing something for school kids. So think from a school kid perspective, not a working professional perspective. So it's okay if it doesn't have too many of the graphics, too many of design elements, but it should be more appealing to a school kid, someone who is in standard 5th to 10th. So what things would relate to that person? For example, maybe if I were to talk from my perspective, if I'm a 90s kid, I will think of the cartoon characters that were there at that time. Let's say Aladdin, let's say Popeye, or Mickey Mouse or Pokemon. Those kind of characters would excite me. But if you talk about the current generation of kids, what is it that they would be excited for? So think from that perspective, come up with a prototype which is like, let's say 2 or 3 levels or 4 levels, have a good user journey in there, and just test it out. Just share it with someone who can just try it out, test out, and then ask the feedback. If the person is going wrong, like say you have designed something and person was not able to understand like why you actually designed it, why, let's say you have some controls, but that particular user is not checking towards that control. That's something you can just analyze, just check it out, but not prompt the user. That is as part of the testing technique. Don't prompt the user that you should do this, and you will land up over here. So that's one piece of advice that I can give. All right, what's the next question? How else could we become empathetic towards the user? So that's a good question, Ashwara. So foremost thing to empathize with the user is more of user interviews and user research. There are two elements to it. One is user research, and another one is user interviews. So you can follow it up with user research again. So it starts like this: you do a user research, which is what is the audience that I want to target. So as I said earlier, if I'm targeting kids, I need to understand what is the generation of kids I'm targeting, what is the age bracket. If you're designing something for 11th and 12th standard students, and you are having basic cartoon characters, that might not be too appealing for that particular user. So you need to understand what is the target audience, so and what things they like most. So that's one piece of advice that I can give. user interview techniques. So you ask certain questions in a way that you are not driving answers from it. You should ask them, hey, what kind of games you play? Uh, Instead of asking, like, let's say you're designing a game which is like gamification of Swatch Bharat Abhiyan, for example. So instead of asking like that, hey, would you be interested in something like this? Start with, hey, what kind of games do you play? How often do you play? Uh, do you play single player? Do you play multiplayer? Those kind of questions can help you empathize with the user better. And then you can go back to your drawing board. You can define the problem statement. You can ideate on it forward. Hope that answers. So we have to make something for schools in India. Any tips for designing? Good question, Shashwat. For school students or anyone, and even from my personal perspective, what I prefer is having minimalistic design. When I say minimalistic design, is it like it's more like having less elements, not too many of the elements out there. Uh, Keep things simple as possible, not to complicate any process, any user. Think of maybe something that you have added might be redundant. For example, you might think of, as I said, you might have created a login screen which is having uh, a username, the password, and stuff like that. Maybe that's not the solution that someone is looking for. Someone just can use biometrics in the phone, or with just phone OTP you can do your task. So those are the things that I can suggest. Keep things really simple. Do not complicate things out there. But sir, I want to prototype in a way without actually creating the game, as I haven't learned all the programs. Um, Hashima, that's completely fine, even though you don't know the programming language or you don't know how to prototype uh, through those softwares. What you can always do is you can come up with wireframes. So that's one way of prototyping, which is you draw on a piece of paper, you draw designs, you draw layouts. Okay, these are the images, these are the screens that will go on and on. So that's something as an approach that you can take. So prototyping not only means that you have to come up with a physical prototype, which is like your, when I say physical, which is basically like your full-fledged prototype which anyone can use. Prototype can also include your wireframes, your design layouts. So yes, that's that. Just if you can give me a second and I can follow up with the questions in a while. All right, we can take up more questions, or if anyone can like talk about what you understood from this entire session. If you would like to share your thoughts, you can put it in the comment section. Great, thanks, Hashima. Yes, so I'm done with my talks and I have the floor open for you all to ask anything, any questions you have. It's more like an AMA kind of a session now, where if you want to ask anything around design thinking, or maybe beyond that, I am more than happy to answer any questions. So if you have any queries, it's more like an ask me anything kind of a question session now. If you have anything, feel free to. So when you say prototyping apps, you mean like softwares, kind of? So while there are some professional softwares like your Adobe Illustrators, you can use that. And then there are a bunch of other prototyping apps, like InVision is something that you can use. There is Adobe XD that you can use. Sketch is there, but I think that's primarily for Mac, if I'm not wrong. I'm not too sure on it. But yeah, there are some prototyping tools that you can use. I can just enter them into the chat as well. So there's this InVision is one, and there is Adobe XD or Illustrator that you can use. There is Sketch that you can try and use it. So these are some of the web apps that you can try. I think few of them are paid. InVision allows you to prototype for free, I think, for just one prototype. Uh, yeah, that's the apps that you can use. These are the recommended ones. All right. Or you can just create those wireframes even on a piece of paper and then scan it, or just click a photo and share it with the team. And so that is also good enough. All right, so what's the next question? It's by Deepthi. So we should empathize the user, right? That's correct. That's the core of whenever we are designing or building something. It's not necessarily tied to design thinking as a process, but in general as well. Whenever, even at Google or even anything that we do, we always empathize with the user. We put ourselves into the user's shoe. Um, how will that person think? Whenever we have to take decisions, whenever we have to come up with a new program, new initiative, always think about we might not be doing that, but how can we think about that person who is into that particular design hackathon kind of an experience for K-12 students, for school students. I might not be a school student now, but that doesn't mean that I can't come up with something like this. I can, if I know how to empathize, I know what the students need, what student will be looking for, what kind of themes someone would be looking for. I can come up with a program. So that's program design basically, or to come up with the solution, which, as I said, targeting a villager or targeting someone in the government departments. So I can design something from that perspective as well. If I can empathize with that person, and with not just empathizing, it follows up with talking to that person. That will give you more insight. So if I go back and talk about um, the story of Doug Dietz, he was able to empathize. That was fine. He was able to define a problem statement. That was also completely fine. But to ideate and to come up with a prototype that helps that particular user, he had to go through a lot of user research, user interviews. So that is also a critical part of design thinking process. So empathizing is one part, which gives you like a light bulb. It just gives you some information. But then when it comes to designing something, these all areas are critically important. You have to follow each and every process, each and every stage of it. To empathize, define, ideate, and then test and validate. Like prototype, after prototyping, you just test and validate it. Validation is also a key element. If you just prototype and don't validate, don't test it, how will you know that whatever you designed was good or making sense? Or do you need more iterations to it? Do you need to refine it? And it's an exhausting process, but it's something that you should still do it, irrespective that you are exhausted. The, maybe the user didn't like whatever the product that you have built, the version first one of it was as crappy as possible, and user, whoever checked it out, didn't like it at all. It's completely fine. You can come up with new version of it. Cool. What's next? What are the main thing on which we have to stress while making our prototype? One, as I said, think of keeping things very simple. So while you're designing prototype, if you can have basic, simple layout journey. So let's say you design a prototype, maybe with programming language or something, you come up with a basic structure to it. But it has these logins kind of a feature that something might not be too essential for judging or something. So maybe you can stress on having a smooth journey of of the user for the first time is coming up. And there's something which is also critical, is there's something called as first time user versus a repeat user. How a person interacts with your solution who's coming for the first time versus how a person interacts after visiting once and then repeating and coming again. So you should have clear understanding of how the first time user will interact, and if a person is coming again, how will that person interact now. So yes, these are the few things that you can stress while you're making your prototype. What is the best way to explain our idea prototype? I think, Abhinav, it completely depends on you. If you want to create wireframes or layouts, it's completely fine. If you want to have more like your full-fledged solution, which is basically like an app-based solution or a web app-based solution, or anything else that you have thought of, a hardware-based solution maybe. So that's completely on you. There's no best way, I would say. It completely depends on the user, whichever works out. But ultimately, it should lead to a kind of a prototype which the end user can see or use to give you more feedback to help you test it out in a better way. Hope that answers. All right, what's the question from the Robert? So what is the main thing on which we have to stress while making a prototype? I think that's a repeat of the previous one. Yeah, I think those are the repeat questions. I like to introduce a character in my game, which I choose already. Should I choose already existing cartoons or a meme, or create my own in order to consider user perspective? Please suggest. That's a good question, Ishmare. It completely depends on you. You might even think of coming up with a new character, new uh, something out of the box which you design. So think of it. Maybe that character becomes like a mascot for the entire game later on. So it's completely on you. You whether you are designing a game which is just like, let's say, if I have to think of how I can gamify the Swatch Bharat Abhiyan by our Prime Minister, and we design it more in a gamification format. Maybe in that case, coming up with a new character or even an existing character would also be fine. So uh, I think that's completely on the use case. Coming up with a new character also is good. It's okay. However, if you feel that there are a lot of efforts that might go in just to create one character, you can think of using an existing cartoon uh, or an meme that can be related to that use case. Cool. That's Do you have any more questions? I hope your progress with Design Hackathon is going great. I think you have few more days to submit your entry for the hackathon, if I'm not wrong. I think 6th May is your deadline to submit the hackathon entries. Hope you're doing great with that. Okay, we have about 10 minutes roughly. Um, if you have any questions regarding the hackathon submissions or anything, feel free to ask. We have team from Incubate Puneet is there, Anamika is there, and they can answer those queries if you have, or we can end it now. I will leave the floor open for next 1 minute. If there are no questions, probably we can end this session a bit early then. Great. Thank you. Thanks everyone, and all the best. Do great. I'm looking forward to amazing solutions made by you all. Uh, and if you have any queries, if you would like to connect, uh, my username is @sedagarwal04. I'm available on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, the same handle. I would prefer Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm usually more responsive over there as compared to other platforms. What exactly are we to submit by 6th? I would request Anamika and Puneet to answer this query. What's the submission process? Anamika, Puneet, if you're call, can you go on mute and let the team know? Okay, I'm not too sure if they can hear me.
Hello.
Yeah, Puneet, there are a few queries regarding submissions. If you can answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Siddhant. It was a really insightful sessions for all of us. So if anyone are having any queries, I'll reach out to you on your Twitter or on personal message, whatever works for me and
Sure,
for you as well. Right?
sure, Puneet.
So
Thank you. Thanks so
thank
much.
you. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm about to close up this live session. If you have any queries, you can reach out to the team directly over mail. That would be the best way forward. Thank you once again and all the best. Take care. Stay safe. Stay indoors. Bye. See you.